Hey, thank you all for being here this morning. We appreciate so much your support. We appreciate our members and our founding members, our board members that are here today. It means so much to us. It really means a tremendous amount to us to have an artist like Bernie Taupin with us. When I first saw his visual art, I was just blown away. I just thought, wow, I want to exhibit that. Monthaven wants to exhibit this. When the curators, Karen and Michael, came to us and said, we have a really special artist, they didn't need to say another word. Special is an understatement. So I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you took time before you came in here and filled your bellies with the delicious food. I love to break bread before we have conversations, so I think now everybody can sit back and relax. I'm going to start, Bernie, this morning saying thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. This is such a great building, great history behind it. I'm really thrilled to be able to support it.
Well, thank you so much.
No,
Thank you to your family, to Heather, your wife.
Thanks everybody for coming out.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
We'll hand out fans later.
Yeah. I know, Bernie, that you discovered really your voice as a lyric writer in 1968 with the song Skyline Pigeon. And I was wondering if you'd tell us, when did you discover your voice as a visual artist?
Well, I think I've always wanted to create visual art. It's just that, unfortunately, in the early days, I from the late 60s all the way through the early 70s, I lived a pretty transient lifestyle, but at the same time, art was always something that fascinated me. I spent a great deal of time in art galleries, museums around the world, and especially in New York in the early 70s, and especially the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which is where I really got a love for the great abstract artists and artists like Rauschenberg and Warhol, Rothko, Franz Klein, people like that. But even before that, when I was growing up, my mother was very influential. She turned me on to people like J.M.W. Turner, who was a huge, looking at his pictures when I was a kid was almost my equivalent of a comic book.
Yeah.
I saw so much adventure in his images. They were so fiery and wonderful, and they inspired me and in ways that really affected my writing in general, not just my wanting to create visual art, because I was too young, obviously, then to even imagine that I would at some point. But it really was when I came to the United States in 1970, and as I say, in New York, I didn't have any money, so the only places you could really get into were sort of art galleries and museums, and that was a good thing, because I think had I been solvent at the time and had sort of a lot of money or whatever, I probably wouldn't have found my way into those kind of places. So they were incredibly inspirational, and I knew at some point in my life I really wanted to put my hand to creating visual art in some way. But I knew when I did do it that I wanted to do something that was on a larger scale. I was never one of those kind of people that wanted to sit on the side of the road with an easel and a little paint box and paint mountains and cows. That wasn't in the wheelhouse that I wanted to get into. I knew that I wanted to create things that were sort of organically based, and so it wasn't until sort of really the early 90s that I found myself sort of settling down in a way that I felt that I was able to start creating. And at that particular point, I bought a ranch in Southern California up sort of on the San Ynez Valley, and there was a big old racquetball court that was sort of adjacent to the house. And being that I wasn't somebody who really wanted to play racquetball, I thought this is a great place to turn into a studio.
Yeah.
So that's what it became, and that's when I really started creating art in earnest. But at the same time, it's like everything else. It's like people that make movies or people that write music. You start by emulating the people that you respect, and who are your sort of heroes and people that inspire you. But ultimately, you have to find your own voice in order to satisfy your creative needs. And that's really what happened with me. I found that the problem was when I started working with paint, and I felt that I was sort of emulating the people that I really admired. A lot of my early work was based on things like people like Hans Hofmann, very cubist kind of things. And it was satisfying, but I felt that I was definitely wanting. There was something driving me, but at the same time, I wasn't creatively satisfied. And it wasn't until, and I always say this about inspiration, you know, you've always got to find an original voice in anything. It's like when you writing songs, it's the same thing. You start by purloining or copying the people that you admire, and it isn't until you really find something original to say that it really takes off and you feel artistically satisfied. And that's what happened with my art, and it wasn't until I really gave up the paintbrushes and started turning towards things like found materials that I really started finding something that I felt it was creatively original. And I basically just lost interest in it. I always said that, you know, my studio went from an art studio to a chop shop.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I found myself buying more materials at the hardware store than the art store, you know. So and then it just became incredibly satisfying. And ultimately, you know, through sort of baby steps, you know, I found my way to what I call these wall sculptures, which are created from found materials, you know. So that's sort of the short version, believe it or not.
Well, you know, you kind of answered one of the questions that I was going to have next, which was kind of when you found your voice or your style, in other words.
Yeah.
And it was a progression that came along as you realized you wanted to move into more, and it is visceral.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
There's no question about it.
Word.
Yeah,
it's the word I was looking for.
Well, it's very visceral. As a matter of fact, when we were working on the installation and we were putting the exhibition up, one of the things that we all talked about was just how, and when I say building furniture, I think you guys understand what I'm saying. This wonderful, incredible piece of art's in front of you, and it's actually coming out. I mean, like sculpture on the wall, and we're real used to seeing sculpture pieces, you know, when you go into a gallery. And you do see media where there's multiple layers of different things that people have used in their art. But Bernie's has created, and we all felt this way, actually something that is like a part of the furnishings in your room that really speak to you. I did tell Bernie something kind of funny.
Just don't sit on it.
Yeah. And I said, you know, you walk around an exhibit, you know, with your glass of wine and you're looking at the great art, and it's wonderful. We all do this, and we have so many fabulous artists everywhere. But when I was walking through Bernie's art, I wanted to get a piece of apple pie and a cup of coffee, you know, because it was like incredibly homey and warm and historic, and you know, the heritage, and the, you know, you're looking at the guitars that he uses and you think, gosh, someone probably did play that, and what songs were played on that. And then you look at the pieces he's put in with them and the thought, and a lot of it, obviously, very found objects. Even Dana shared with me a couple of things, like finding things on the side of the places and grabbing them and keeping them, you know. Well, you know, tell us a little bit.
Actually, it's funny you should say that, because my studio, which I ultimately moved to, and now I've moved on, but I had a studio that was an old abandoned warehouse, and around it, there were a lot of buildings that were sort of dilapidated. And I would literally go out and tear pieces off these buildings, like whether it was aluminum siding or, moss-covered planks. In fact, some of these pieces are actually created on the side. I'd tear a huge sheet of siding off one of these buildings that had all this patina and moss on it, and that would be my canvas. Because I rarely use canvas now because it doesn't hold the pieces that I'm creating. But yeah, they are the baseboards of sort of antiquity, really.
It's so true. It's just and it's so wonderful to be able to work in that form and be able to use those.
It's like recreating history on history.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you will.
Yeah. The old Melrose bowling alley lanes in Nashville years ago got torn down. Some of you are familiar with that. And they tore all those bowling alley lanes. And I was thinking about Bernie because we took bowling alley lanes and made the top of our island in our kitchen that Johnny Cash bowled on and Waylon Jennings and all the guys. And I said, oh, Bernie would have loved those floors. He'd go crazy. Tell us a little bit about where you do create in your process. I mean, like you say, you call it a chop shop. That's on don't you have a studio at home?
No, actually, funnily enough, I'm studio-less at the moment. I'm looking for a new...
We can fix that.
Yeah. But yeah, the place that I was talking about, unfortunately, the property got sold, and now it's being, they're building a hotel on it or something. And I did move to another place which I didn't care for. And it's very important that you find the right space to create it in. Some places just don't have the mojo.
Yeah.
And this place I moved to was too modern. And so I'm actually in the process now of finding somewhere new to create. But I'm sure that will come along soon.
Do you just completely from mental, or do you sketch anything out, or take any photographs?
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, I do have sketchbooks, and I will sketch ideas out and make notes about kind of ideas. But I think one of the things you have to understand about my art, and especially the art that's being shown here, which most of the pieces here have musical reference to them. And one of the things that's very, very important to me is, American roots music is very, very much something that I believe wholeheartedly in, and I'm a great supporter of making sure that a lot of those characters and people who are historically viable remain so. There's so many. We're moving so fast now that history is being forgotten, and a lot of these people that I sort of create my pieces around are people that I don't think many young people today, know about. So in a way, I call my pieces sometimes, they're sort of like musical archaeology. It's like I feel like I'm trying to resurrect these particular artists. I mean, some of the people represented here today are like the Louvin brothers, who were so inspirational years ago in that they evolved into people like the Everly brothers,
Yes.
And even before the Louvin brothers, the Blue Sky Boys who reference, the Louvin brothers idolized, and then the Everly brothers idolized the Louvin brothers, and so on and so on. And then you got Simon and Garfunkel, who loved the Everly brothers. So as they move generationally along, the originators are getting forgotten.
That's right.
And one of the things that's really important to me is they're not forgotten. And there's a piece in there called "Tragic Songs of Life," which is a very, very important album in my life, which was an album that turned me on to the Louvin brothers when I was young. And there's a piece in there dedicated to Cliff Gallup, who was Gene Vincent's guitar player.
That's a great
which is
story.
really obscure, but he was there's great stories about him. And if you look back, if somebody just sees that piece and they don't know who Cliff Gallup is, maybe they're going to look it up.
Yes.
You know, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I had a conversation this morning with a couple that talked to me about that exact piece and the story with it and how fascinating it was.
And there's a piece in there also, you know, that references Link Ray, which is kind of ironic because Link Ray was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year along with me. So that was great. You know, I really felt that, not that I had anything to do with that, but it made me, it was a very satisfying moment to know that, you know, he was being recognized. And that's one of the pieces in there. So that, I think it's important that everybody knows that that's really a vital part of why I create these pieces. I used to have a radio show on Sirius called American Roots Radio, and the idea behind that was the same thing, salvaging these guys from being wrecks of history, you know, and I don't want that to happen.
So important. Thank you for that, actually, through your art. Going to the topic of music, we're in Nashville where most songs, and everyone here realizes this, is a real collaborative effort. You might have 2, 3, 4 writers on a song. And Bernie, basically, I believe I'm right on this, most of your life did write solo, singularly. It was more of a private issue with him. As a lyricist, he wrote his lyrics by himself, so to speak. And a lot of writers, you know, write collectively. Like we say, we know, especially here in Nashville. And yet you never have considered, and your songs obviously rhyme incredibly well, your lyrics are incredible, but you never considered yourself a poet.
No, absolutely not.
Tell us a little about your feelings on that.
Well, it's simply the fact that I think it's an insult to poets.
There you go.
I mean, the thing is that poetry, lyrical, you know, creation is completely different, I think, from poetry. I mean, people might disagree, but I just don't like when people refer to me as a poet, because I'm not. I'm a lyricist.
Oh, your grandfather.
I write lyrics to be put to a melody. I don't write them to stand on their own.
Right.
And, you know, I think people need to understand. I mean, it's a huge compliment. And there probably are, I mean, I literally can't think of one musical artist outside of Leonard Cohen that I would call a poet. I mean, Leonard Cohen was a poet, you know, and he wrote poetry. And and not even Dylan, you know, I mean, maybe some of the early stuff, but no, I mean, when you write a lyric, you write it to be put to a melody. You don't write it to stand on its own. And if people like the fact that, you know, to refer to me as that, but I don't find it as a compliment. I mean, it is a compliment, but it's kind of a backhanded one, you know, because I don't see myself in those terms, you know. Music is so important, and it does so much to complement the lyric, and that's how it should be. Again, you know, I can't stop people from referring to me as that, but don't.
And your grandfather, and your grandfather was very influential on you.
Well, my mother and my grandfather, they're the ones that really taught me everything. I mean, I was shit at school.
Yeah.
You know? No, I didn't learn a thing at school, which is why I can't add. I'd have somebody else, you know, do the check at dinner. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. When you were painting Civil War Trilogy, which it was painted.
Yes, well that dates back to the time that it's one of the few things that I'm sort of happy about, so that's why I didn't mind it being part of this show.
Yes. Well, did you ever think when you were painting it that it would be installed and be on exhibition in a museum that actually was a Civil War field hospital?
Well, That did cross my mind the other day when I was looking at the inventory. I thought, yes, that's pretty ironic.
It is really ironic.
Yeah, and it's a huge compliment too, absolutely.
It really is. When we, of course, installed it, that was something we all talked about here, and thought it was very ironic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, share with us where your love for the American West, the cowboy, share a little bit of that really influence that your really love of what we call your love of cowboys. It's obvious in your work as at Home on the Range. It's a great example. The Louis L'Amour books.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting because my love for the American West actually didn't come from movies and books. It actually came more from music, from country, true like Western country music. I always said, you know, that the blue touch paper, the catalyst for me was always the Marty Robbins album, you know, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs. That was like my history book when I was a kid. I think it was the first album that I ever owned. And it just opened up. You know, the thing is, it's funny, I just wrote a foreword for a photography book of the American Cowboys, which is an incredible photographer, a French lady. I just wrote the preface for the book. And I started it by saying, you know, when I was a kid, I used to sort of watch The Lone Ranger and seeing this guy riding around, you know, with silver pistols in what looked like a powder blue jumpsuit. And I kind of went, I don't think that's what cowboys are all about. and so, and the same, you know, I mean, as much as I love people like Roy Rogers, and, you know, it's in my artwork in there, you know, and it's a homage to those singing cowboys, which I love. I love that whole aspect of it. But as for the realism of it, I learned from the Marty Robbins album, you know, some of the John Ford early movies, but there was something about the songs on that particular album they really jumped out of the grooves. They were almost, you could feel the dust, you could feel that there was so much about breaking horses, and it just encompassed everything. It wasn't just about gunfighters and quick draw and stuff like that. The stuff that really interested me was the stuff about real cowboys. You know, the guys that sort of did the trail riots and broke the horses, and, you know, the Bronx, and that's where it really all sort of came from in the first place. And then obviously, you know, I started taking a deeper interest, and that's when, you know, I started reading history, and just American history always fascinated me far more than the history of the country that I was born in. I had no interest whatsoever in that. I always was gravitating slowly towards this country, and, you know, from the day that I set foot on it in the fall of 1970, I never wanted to go back. You know, it's like I'd found the motherland, basically. And, you know, the thing about cowboying is if you're going to do it, you have to take it seriously. And I did it for a long time. You know, I rode as a non-pro cutter for 10 years, and, you know, raised horses, learned how to mend fences, and, you know, totally enveloped myself in the whole lifestyle. And as I say, you know, when you're dealing with cowboys, they don't accept any bullshit. You have to be the real deal. You can't, you know, there's no such thing as a dude ranch, and you can't go play at it on the weekend. You have to immerse yourself in it 100%, else they're going to kick your ass.
I love that. I love that. And of course, we cannot, your patriotism, your love of the American flag, if you did not get on the back of the pricing little sheets that we have on the work, we were able to to put the piece that Bernie wrote that is beautiful. If you have not had the opportunity to read it, it's on the back there. It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I don't think I need to say anything about that because that says it all. So I would encourage, I mean, if you're interested, of course. but I would encourage you to read that because that's exactly how I feel, and there's no point in me reiterating it right now. I mean, because that's my sort of ideology, basically.
And it's incredible. As we kind of wrap up, I have something I want to talk to you about. I know you love.
I'm married, sorry.
We got that deal backstage earlier. What do you think? That's Heather, and she's still here.
I'm glad to sit next to the guy in the Dodgers shirt. Are we going to meet the Yankees today?
Damn right, baby.
Monthaven Arts and Cultural Center is dedicated, a lot of the people here know that, to continuing to exhibit yearly as often as we can. We try every year to have what we call a Western art exhibition. And it's featuring, some of you came to Lyrical Cowboy or you came to Go West Young Man. These are great Western art exhibitions that we had. We partnered with the Booth Western Art Museum out of Cartersville, Georgia. It's an incredible museum, 160,000 square feet of some of the finest Western art in the world you'll ever see. And we want to do a show in 2025. And I want to ask you something. I talked to Seth Hopkins, the executive director, and he and I were kind of talking about you. He is on the host committee here. He couldn't be here this weekend. We were wondering if you would even consider curating a Western art exhibition next year for us.
Absolutely.
Woo!
Next year, though, right? Okay.
I will get with Heather, your handler, and wife.
Yeah, no, that's a huge compliment.
Yes. Oh, I think it is. And when Seth and I were talking, we said, "Oh, that would be perfect. He just has to do it." So I prayed you would say yes, and
Yeah, no, it'd be my honor.
I thought, well, I put him on the spot here in front of everybody. I say no. What we'll do, and we're only going to take a couple of questions. We're not going to leave Bernie up here really long. I thought we would let a couple of questions be asked about his art or something that pertains to his art. If we have anyone here that would like to ask Bernie a couple of questions quickly, and then we'll go in. He is going to be here for a little bit. If you'd like to talk to him about the pieces, that would be great. Anybody have a specific question? Yes, sir.
The guitars have been burned. Is that symbolic of the fire in American music?
Well, again, as part of the archaeological rebirth of them, what I do with the guitars, obviously, I buy them or get them donated brand new. Well, they're not brand new. Some of them are old, some of them are new. And I basically deconstruct them and then reconstruct them. So I'll take them up. I literally will take them apart. It looks like I have them sort of all hanging on. It looks like the back of a meat truck. But I will take them apart and I'll burn them, scorch them. Then I'll maybe put them back together. But I'll use all different parts of them, but I will cut them up and hammer them, and then, as I say, again, it's like a sort of archaeological rebirth, So it's fun.
Yes.
So, as Cheryl pointed out, you don't often write with other people, but I was in an artist studio last week in LA, and I saw a collaboration painting you did with somebody. And so I wonder, how do you select the artists that you're going to work with?
Oh, well, that's a question for that gentleman over there. I know what you're talking about. Is that a piece that I did with Risk?
Wow, so there's only one, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. He's the only one.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a street artist. And he took a bunch of my old pieces, earlier work, and did some, because he also represents, we're represented by the same people. So I thought that was fun to have somebody do that. But thank you. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, we can talk about the Dodgers and the Yankees.
Yeah.
Not only is, I will say this, when you were talking about Out the Pie, also a big baseball fan, Dodgers fan. So, yay. But I want to say thank you from Tumbleweed Connection to the Union with Leon Russell. About Americana, those two albums, if you listen to them, the lyrics and the music is pure Americana. My question on the artist, do you start with the object first, a piece, or do you start with the vision when she was asking about the draft? I mean, I'm sure it's not ever the same.
You're talking about these pieces?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like I said earlier, it's a continuation of that. You know, if there's a particular artist that I suddenly have an idea about that is sort of relatively obscure, then that I feel is worth investing time into, and there is something about that particular artist that is interesting, then that motivates me to sort of create something around that particular artist. But there has to be something that, it's like the Louvin Brothers piece, for instance, you know, Charlie and Ira, like one played the mandolin, one played the guitar. So the combination of that and the fact that their sort of counter harmonies were really interesting, the way that they sort of worked it with each other. And I thought that bringing those two together with those two instruments, you know, in that particular piece, and the fact that album that I mentioned, you know, Tragic Songs of Life, was so influential to me when I was young. So all of those components, you know, go, okay, I can put all that together. But I have to have that in order to do it. I mean, I've got, it's not here, but I have a Chuck Berry piece. Now, obviously, Chuck Berry's far more, you know, well-known than some of the more obscure pieces. But I've got a piece that I have a guitar that is exactly kind of the same guitar that Chuck Berry played, and it has a hatchet, like, embedded in it, you know, so the piece sticks out like this far from the wall, you know, so it probably was dangerous to have here because so, you know, now why did I do that? Well, you know, kind of Chuck had a reputation for being a little prickly, you know, so I put those two together and I thought, well, that's kind of the thing he might have done, you know, if he got on the wrong side of him, you know, which he did occasionally. I mean, like knocking Keith Richards out and stuff like that, you know. So he had that violent side, so I thought the hatchet, you know, was kind of complemented the piece, you know. So yeah, that was an interesting question.
You'll have to think about a Jerry Lee Lewis piece.
Yeah, right. Well, I could just set fire to one. Right, it's get a keyboard and just cover it in gasoline and just throw a match on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music when you're working?
Absolutely,
and
yes.
What do you listen to?
Yeah. You know, it's funny, it depends what I'm doing. It depends what I'm creating, you know. If I'm creating, again, I'm using the Louvin Brothers thing as a continual blueprint here. But say I'm creating that piece, I'll probably play Louvin Brothers music. You know, if I'm doing Chuck Berry piece, I'll probably play. But most of the time I play jazz because I'm such a jazz fanatic. You know? But yeah, it depends. I mean, I like to play music that creates a sort of, you know, sort of vital aspect to what you're doing at the time, you know. So it's very important, though, and I play it loud.
It makes me think that you're talking about how the lyrics contribute to the music, and now I'm thinking as an artist how the music contributes to the making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they all go hand in hand. I mean, it's all sort of, it's like not a vicious circle, it's a complementary circle, you know. But yeah, it all plays, you know, it all comes from the same place.
Yeah.
You know, if you're writing, creating lyrical work, or writing prose, or doing a painting, or creating you know, a piece that, again, is like my piece is from found objects. It all comes from the same place, you know. It's all here. That's it.
An artist's space is very important to how they create. If you could give me one word barometer, one word emotion that described when you shut down your last studio, and why did you feel the way you felt?
One word? Disappointed.
Yeah. Disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed. No, I mean, as I said earlier, you know, the space that you create in is really important, which is why I emphasize the fact that when I moved from that particular space, the next space I had was basically a corrugated kind of modern garage. and I didn't do anything in it because I didn't feel inspired in that particular space. I mean, I loved this warehouse that I had because it was huge, and I could create, you know, because these pieces aren't small, and they encompass a lot of different materials. And as I say, you know, I have chainsaws and all drills and all kinds of things, and the whole place is covered in bits of found objects, you know, whether they're mannequins or siding. As I said, it was really vital, you know, it was really kind of a visceral space to work in, because I could, as I say, I could create 2 or 3, 4 pieces at the same time. So that was really, really enjoyable, and I'd like to be able to find another space like that. A warehouse is just wonderful because there's a lot of history and there's a lot of ghosts in there of you know, whatever's been going on there beforehand, and that's really important. Just to me, anyway.
Thank you.
Anybody else before we?
I got one.
Okay.
A lyric question. You said when artists are beginning, they emulate their heroes
Yes, sir.
to learn their craft. Who did you emulate to learn the craft of lyrics?
Well, I think it was unintentional because when Elton and I first started writing in the late 60s, the whole thing was, it was the era of psychedelia, basically. So the people that were prominent at the time were people like Procol Harum, Cream, Pink Floyd, and so the lyrics were all of a very sort of I don't know, sort of use a better word, you know, it was all sort of psychedelia, and
Esoteric.
yeah, it was
Ethereal.
esoteric. It didn't make any sense, and which was an easy fit, you know. So yeah, we were definitely sort of coasting on that kind of whole deal. You know, it was the time of sort of things like Whiter Shade of Pale and, you know, the Pete Brown stuff that they did with Cream, you know, and that's how we started off, but it wasn't very satisfying and it wasn't very good. You know, it really wasn't, because we were just emulating other people, and that's not satisfying. And that's like, you know I've said it to the point of sounding like a broken record, but until you find your own voice, you're just coasting. You're not getting anywhere.
Yes, Michael.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
This gentleman over here.
I just, as a follow-up to that, I mean, your love of America and of jazz and American music like that, did you find that other lyrics like Johnny Mercer or Ira Gershwin, or, you know, very prominent old school American lyricists that did write about Western experience, Johnny Mercer in particular,
Yeah.
was that more of an influence later on?
I could never hope to sort of stand in those kind of shoes, you know. I mean, at the time back then, I mean, no, we weren't sort of leaning towards those writers, because they wrote the Great American Songbook, and in order to do that, you have to put yourself into that style of music, which we weren't doing at the time. We were young and just hungry and trying to, you know, ride on the coattails of everything that was contemporary at the time. But I absolutely, you know, those guys, I mean, they broke the mold when those guys passed away. I mean, they were just, they were somewhere else for us. I mean, way surpassing us.
Just like we talk about the greatest generations.
Yes.
Those
yes.
are the type of thing.
I'm curious, with maybe the immediate gratification of selling songs, in your art, can you comment on selling and placing your art, the time it takes and the fulfillment you get from it ending up in someone else's hands that you feel and touch because it's a smaller community?
I'm not precious about the things that I create, you know. I mean, I don't mind letting them go, because I love the fact that people are going to get, you know, some pleasure out of them. I don't think about selling. It doesn't cross my mind. You know, I mean, yes, it's satisfying if they fly off the wall, because obviously you've got that sense of satisfaction that people are enjoying them. But I don't think it from a monetary kind of point of view at all. You know, I like to, you know, I don't think of them, they're not my children and I had to let them go. No, I'm not precious at all like that. I'm quite happy to see them move on. You know, that's the reason I create them, because I want people to enjoy them and draw inspiration from them and draw their own conclusions from what they mean to them, you know. So that, I find it, on the contrary, I find it incredibly satisfying. It's a good question. Thank you.
Okay,
All
well,
right, right.
yeah, we want to let Bernie have some time inside and cool off. So I'd like to thank you all. Let's give Bernie an incredible